All right, review for Unit 3, which is for Test 4. It's important to practice showing your work, thinking out how you approach each problem because you're required to on the test. On the test, you'll receive no credit for answers without work shown. So supportive work, just not writing any old thing down. It has to show your thinking about how you arrived at this answer. Prove that you understand where this answer came from and how it was arrived at. Okay? So practicing showing your work on here is important, not just knowing the answer. So number 1 says solve equations by completing the square. So make sure you're following the directions for each of these. If you get 2 solutions, make sure they're separated by a comma. Okay? Completing the square says step 1, you're supposed to remove any numerical coefficients that are in front of the first term if they're in proper order equal to 0. If there is something other than a 1. So remove, reduce, reduce. Okay? Then you're supposed to move the C term to the other side of the equation properly, so you're adding its opposite. I leave a gap right there and go ahead and write the b over 2 squared plus same thing on the other side, which will result in w minus 1 right there. Okay, what's in there goes there. But on this side, a negative 2 over 2 is a negative 1 squared is a positive 1, so this is going to be a 25. And then you square root both sides. It's an even root, so we're going to put a plus minus square root of 25, which is 5. Then we're going to move the 1 over. W equals 1 plus 5 and 1 minus 5. All right. Because they are whole numbers, this would have worked if I had factored after removing that, but it said specifically to complete solve equation by completing the square. So that was what is required, listing both with a comma between them. Okay? All right, solve quadratic using the formula. Step 1 in using the formula is to put all the terms on one side. Properly. So my A is negative 3, my B is 8, my C is negative 5. So when I put it in the quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a, I will get negative 8 plus or minus, excuse me, apologize, b squared 4ac 2 times a So, sorry, I'm keeping track on my key too to make sure, double checking everything's correct. So 64 minus 1260. So that's going to be 4. You can put the entire discriminant into your calculator the way it's sitting there. So make sure you come up with that 4. Negative 6, so x equals negative 8 plus or minus 2 over negative 6. So negative 8 plus 2 over negative 6 is negative 6 over negative 6 is 1. And then negative 8 minus 2 over is negative 10. Negative 6 is 5 over 3. So x equals 1, 5 over 3. Alrighty. Solve using the formula. Move everything over to one side. Alright, so my A is 3, my B is 1, and my C is 4. So Z equals, don't put X, put Z. Opposite B, which is -1, plus or minus square root of B squared minus 4 times 3 times 4 over 2 times 3. Show your works to show the setup so you can get some credit for it, okay? Z equals -1 plus or minus square root of 1 minus 16 times 3 is 48, so a -47 over 6. That needs to have the -1 pulled out. It's an I. All right, Z equals -1 plus I square root of 47 over 6, and -1 minus I 47 over 6. Okay. Practice with the quadratic formula. So I'm going to take a 4 out, but I don't. I just go right to A equals 4, B equals 0, because there's no x, single x term there, x to the first power. C equals a -20. So just follow procedure. X, B is 0. This is how I do these. Same way as I do all the other ones. So this plus and minus goes with the radical sign, not the 0. So this is going to be -4 times 4 is 16 times a -20 comes out to a double negative's a positive, so 320 over 8. 320 has a 64 and a 5. So plus or minus 8 square root of 5 over 8. And because there's a 0 in front, I'm allowed to do that. So x equals square root of 5 and negative square root of 5. So moving on to the square root property. Square root property is the even property, even root property, and then the odd root property. So 5 is an odd root property. Taking the root, this will leave 2x plus 2 equals the fifth root of -1024. Odd roots are going to have a negative, are allowed to have a negative, right, as their root. So this is going to be a -4. A -4, 5 times itself, is going to be a -1024. Okay? And we just solve for x. Watch all the signs going on here. X equals 3. And because it's an odd root, I don't have to do any kind of checking. Okay? And I get one answer. This one has an exponent in the middle of it, binomial, so I need to move the 6. (42 minus 6, 36). To move the 4. 5x minus 5 is squared. I got my term alone. It's squared. My binomial that's squared alone on one side. And since it's a square, I want a square root. That's an even square, so I need to put a plus or minus. The square root of 9 is 3. Move the 5 over. And divide by 5. So x equals 5 plus 3 divided by 5, and 5 minus 3 divided by 5. Orders or operations say add the 5 and 3 together. Give me a minute. I want to make sure I did this right. That was a positive. That was, yeah, okay. So this is going to be 10, not 10, excuse me, 8 over 5, and this one's going to be 2 over 5. I just want to check this didn't mess up a sign here. That's positive. That was negative. Moved it over. Yep, that's correct. Okay, so x is going to equal 8 over 5 and 2 over 5. They are not reducible. Done page 1.